I was sitting in my office at the OA building one afternoon when there was a knock on the door. "Enter at your own risk." Pistis, my secretary, opened the door and came inside. "I see you're in a pleasant mood today," she said dryly as she closed the door. "Did you come in here to bust my chops, or do you want something?" "I came to remind you that today is the day for you to keep your yearly promise," she said, a huge grin on her face. Groaning, I put my elbows on my desk, resting my head in my hands. "You've got to be kidding me." "Nope," Pistis replied. "I've got everything ready for you in the usual spot. They're waiting on you to arrive." "Well, they can just keep waiting. I absolutely refuse to do it this year." "You say that every year, and you always go anyway." "Yeah, well, this time it's different." "Why is it different?" I tried to come up with a good answer and failed miserably. "It just is, damn it! Now get out of my office! I have important work to do." Pistis walked over, placed her hands on the edge of my desk, and leaned forward. "There is nothing more important than this, especially this time of the year. Now get your butt in gear and get over there." Sighing, I got up and walked towards the door. If I didn't do it, Pistis would silently stand in my office, glaring at me, till I conceded. We've been doing this song and dance for decades, and it always ended the same way. As I left the OA building and made my way to the big department store in town, I thought back on the day this whole mess started. It was shortly after the end of World War I. Back then, my office was still located on Mount Olympus. Going over our monthly figures, I am also the god of commerce, for those of you who don't know that. I love drachmas more than my money-grubbing brother, Zeus. I noticed that there was a serious drop-off in toys. But that didn't make sense to me, because December has always been the big month for that department. As I continued going over the figures, I noticed that there was an uptick in materials, but only for one area, the North Pole. But who in blue blazes lives up there? Too bloody cold for my tastes. I called Pistis into my office. "What's the deal?" I said, holding out a sheet of paper for her to look at. "Someone is messing in on my profits here." Taking the paper from me, she glanced over it. "Yeah, and?" "What do you mean, and?" I snapped, glaring at her. "Less profits means you don't get a pay raise. Have you considered that?" "You don't pay me. Your brother does, and he pays me a lot to put up with your crap," she retorted, tossing the paper back on my desk. "Why has there been an increase in materials being sent to one area?" I wanted to know. "Well, that's Noel." "And who is Noel?" "A very nice man who doesn't need any of your grief." Sighing, I rubbed my temples. "Pistis, does Noel live in the North Pole?" "Oh, yes, he has a lovely house up there." "Is that why he has requested all these materials?" "Oh, no, those are for his children." Looking down at the numbers again, I looked up at her. "He has that many children?" "Millions." I sat back in my chair, my mouth hanging open. Millions? I mean, my brothers got around in their younger days, but even they didn't have millions of children. "Perhaps you should clarify that statement, Pistis, because it is not possible for one man to have fathered millions of children." "I didn't say they were all his." "No one would blame me if I strangled her to death. The only problem was, she was immortal." Sighing again, I said, "I'm probably going to hate myself for this, but just how many wives does this man have?" "Just the one. She's dead to me." "Pistis," I said, a warning tone in my voice. "Hermes, you have absolutely nothing to worry about," she said in a soothing tone. "He is a very nice man who makes toys and gives them away to children all over the world every year." "Gives them away?" I yelled, my blood pressure rising. "What do you mean he gives them away?" "Just what I said. He flies all over the world in one night, leaving toys for each boy and girl." "Well, this is the biggest load of—" Pistis gave me a warning look. "How long has this been going on?" She shrugged. "I don't know. Years?" "This man is cutting into my bottom line, and you never bothered to mention it to me before now?" I thought you knew. You never complained about it before. I stood up. Well, I'm complaining now. I'm going to the North Pole to have a word with... I waved my hand at her. What's his name? Noel Class, but the children call him Santa Claus. What the hell kind of name is that? I stormed towards the door, grabbing the doorknob and threw the door open. Hermes. What? Are you going dressed like that? I looked down at my clothes. I was wearing Bermuda shorts and a blue Visit Mount Olympus t-shirt. But what's wrong with what I have on? Well, it's not exactly business attire, and Noel does live in the North Pole. It's a bit cold up there. And you're more of the warm weather kind of guy. Growling, I stomped out the door. I'll go home and change first. Hold my calls until I get back. As I headed for my house, I grumbled and muttered under my breath, drawing looks of concern from people on the streets. Giving away toys, undercutting my bottom line. What does this idiot think he is? Zeus? No one takes a drachma from me and gets away with it. Nobody. Not even this Santa Claus. Pistis was right about one thing. I was a warm weather kind of guy. Even though I had gone home to change, I could still feel the cold wind down to my bones. As I knocked on the door of a rather large home in the middle of the North Pole, I shivered and pulled the collar of my jacket tighter around my neck. The door opened, and a woman, her white hair pulled back into a ponytail, was wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. Yes, can I help you? Yes, ma'am, I replied. I'm looking for someone named Noel Class. She looked me over. You're a little tall to be an elf, aren't you? She said with a twinkle in her eye. I bit back the retort that was at the tip of my tongue. I'm not here to apply for a job, ma'am. I came to discuss some business with Mr. Class. She stepped aside. Won't you come in, Mr. Hermes, ma'am. Mr. Hermes, she echoed as she closed the door behind me. Give me just a minute. I'll see if I can find him. While she was gone, I took the opportunity to look around. The hallway led to a rather large open room. There were couches, love seats, and chairs in various places around the room, all different sizes. There was a roaring fire to my left, and I walked over to warm myself up. Not exactly dressed for this type of weather, are you? Said a deep male voice. I turned around. A man about 60 stood next to the woman who let me in. He was taller than I was, but more rotund. He was wearing a long-sleeved white shirt, a red pair of pants that were held up by a pair of rainbow-colored suspenders, and black slippers. As he walked towards me, I noticed a brown pipe in his left hand. Are you Mr. Claus? Yes, I am, he said, holding out his hand to me. I shook it. And you're Mr. Hermes. Everyone just calls me Hermes. All right, and this is my wife, Joy. We've met. Joy, why don't you bring us some cider and a few of those cookies I can smell from your kitchen? I don't think you need any more cookies, Noel, she said. You need to go on a diet. Pshaw, he snorted. I'm just the right size. Well, if you stay just the right size, I'm going to have to adjust your suit again, she replied. Just bring me some of those cookies, woman, he said, playfully swatting her on the butt. Why don't you have a seat, Hermes? I took a seat in the leather chair near the fire. I want to discuss some business with you. Certainly, certainly. What kind of business? My secretary informed me that you are giving away toys. Well, yes, that's what I do. It needs to stop. Noel looked shocked. Goodness me, why? Joy interrupted us, carrying a tray laden with mugs of cider and a plate of cookies. I stood up, took the tray from her, and placed it on the coffee table in front of Noel. Thank you, young man, she said as she handed a mug to her husband, then to me, before taking one for herself. She sat down in the chair next to Noel and grabbed a cookie. "What are we talking about?"
"He wants me to stop giving away our toys."
"Oh, I am so sorry, but I'm afraid not," Joy said, taking a sip of her cider. "I'm afraid I must insist. You're hurting my bottom line. I'm losing drachma because of your lackadaisical business practice."
"Lackadaisical?" Noel said. "I don't understand why."
"Because he's the god of commerce, dear," Joy replied, patting her husband's arm. I looked at her, startled. "You know who I am?" "Well, of course, my dear," she chuckled. "I knew you were coming, though. Your lovely secretary, Pistis, called me, giving a heads up. Such a delightful woman." I made a mental note to fire Pistis when I got home. "If you know who I am, then you understand my position. I can't allow you to give away—"
"You can't allow me?" Noel said, an angry look on his face.
A knock on the door interrupted our conversation. Joy got up and went to answer it. She returned, followed by a rather short man carrying a clipboard.
"Boss, if you don't kick it into gear, we're going to be late," he said. "The team is hitched up and ready to go, and the bags are in the back of the sleigh. We need to get you in the air in 10 minutes.
Noel put his mug on the coffee table and pushed himself out of his chair.
All right, Clive. There's no need to get your knickers in a twist."
"Noel, why don't you take our visitor with you?" Joy suggested. "Let him get a first-hand look at our operation here."
"Well, that's out of the question," Clive said. "There's only room for the boss and 2 elves in the sleigh. We cannot accommodate—"
He looked me over.
"A man of his stature, even if he is scrawny."
I decided right then I was going to smite the smart-mouthed little snot on the spot, then call Zeus to strike the place with a few lightning bolts and destroy it all.
"Hermes can be my assistant for the night, Clive. You can give Tony and Randy the night off."
"No, sir," Clive said, furiously shaking his head. "He's an amateur, a nobody. We can't make one mistake, and you know that. We have a tight schedule to keep."
"Clive,"
Noel said gently, putting his hand on the shorter man's shoulder,
"it will be okay. I'm sure he's a fast learner and will do just fine. Don't worry. I know what I'm doing."
Frowning, Clive looked at his watch. 7 minutes. Can I move on? He glanced at my clothes.
"I better find him something warmer to wear, or he's going to freeze to death. Come on."
Joy took the mug out of my hands and pulled me to my feet. "You better hurry along, Hermes. We don't have much time." 5 minutes later, I was standing next to an enormous sleigh that was hitched to 8 reindeer wearing the most ridiculous-looking green outfits I have ever seen. And what was with the bells on the shoes? I looked like an idiot. Before I could change my mind, Clive shoved me up the ladder and into the sleigh.
"I strongly suggest you buckle up," he said. "You're fixing to go on a wild ride."
"Ha!" I scoffed. "I've been on wild rides before. This will be easy."
"Yeah, all the beginners say that. We're still trying to find the last one. Think the boss lost him over Mount Everest."
My mouth fell open as Noel climbed onto the other side.
"Are we ready to go?"
he asked Clive.
"Yes, sir. Good flight,"
he said as he climbed back down and removed the ladder.
"Hang on, Hermes. Here we go."
He snapped the reins and the reindeer started running. I was amazed that they could pull the sleigh, and astonished with everything started lifting off the ground and into the air. Well, son of a... The reindeer turned to the left and flew faster. "How are they doing that?" I asked him.
"Magic."
Well, I didn't buy that for a minute. I started looking around to see if there was a flying rug or something underneath the sleigh. Unfortunately, at the moment, the reindeer took a sharp right, and I fell out of the sleigh. Oh, this was not good. My wings snapped open, leaving the green shirt in shreds, falling to the ground instead of me. Despite the cold air, I was pretty hot. Being dumped out of a sled unceremoniously had that effect on a god. Noel had looped around and came back, hovering next to me.
"You all right there, Hermes?"
he asked me with a grin on his face.
Didn't Clive tell you to put on the seatbelt before you got in?
I was pretty sure I heard one of the reindeers snort, and I resisted the urge to smite it on the spot. This is not funny, fat man, I growled.
Don't get your shirt in a twist. Oh, I see you lost your shirt. Sorry about that. We dump all the new elves on the sleigh on their first run. It's tradition.
I'm not an elf, and let me tell you what you can do with your tradition.
Tell me later, he replied. I've got a schedule to keep.
Reluctantly, I got back into the sleigh, folding my wings around me to keep me warm. Santa reached behind him and handed me a red jacket.
It's all I got, I'm afraid.
I put my wings away and slipped on the oversized red jacket with white fur trim. Instantly, it shrank to fit me. Yeah, nothing odd about that at all, right? What's the big deal about giving away the toys? You're throwing a lot of good drachma down the drain. Snapping the reins, Santa gave me a sad look as the reindeer took off at top speed.
Not everything in life is about drachma, Hermes.
That's just blasphemy. I am the god of commerce. How dare you say something like that to me?
You can't see beyond your ledgers, Santa continued. If you'd look up every once in a while, you would find what life is really about.
I responded, crossing my arms. The night flew by as he made his rounds. He stopped at every house, rich or poor. He did not differentiate between the economic classes. Every child received the same well-made, beautiful toys.
Well, I know what you're thinking,
Santa said at one point. I highly doubt it, I scoffed.
You're wondering why I'm leaving toys for the rich children, when their parents can afford to buy them whatever they want.
There was no way I was going to admit that thought had crossed my mind, so I simply shrugged.
Just because a family has money does not mean that they get the same amount of love and attention, he pointed out. For one night, I want them to feel as if they are loved just for themselves, not for who their parents are.
We continued on his rounds, going to places where families barely had the coal to heat their homes. Again, the same gifts were left for their children. However, he left food on their tables for Christmas morning. Once, he knelt next to a brown-haired little girl, gently stroking her hair and touching her nose. She giggled in her sleep and sighed. When we got back into the sleigh, I said, "Why did you do that?"
She reminds me of my daughter when she was that little,
he said quietly.
She became very sick one year, and we lost her. Her name was Noelle.
The rest of the night flew by, and I was surprised to find myself helping him lay out gifts and meals. I even started to enjoy what I was doing. The lesson was not lost on me. Did this mean I was going soft? Nike would say it meant I had a heart. We arrived back at the North Pole as dawn broke on the horizon. I got out as Clive and 2 other elves came to put the reindeer in the barn.
So, Hermes, Santa said as he led me into the house, do you understand why I'm not worried about the drachma, as you said previously? It isn't about that. It's about the children.
Yes, I got it.
Do you really?
I nodded. I'm going to do something that nobody at home would believe if you told them.
Really? And what's that?
I am going to make a donation of the materials you need every year. Use the money you have for coal as well as meals for those in need.
Well,
Santa said, sitting down in his chair and picking up his pipe.
This is a surprise. I accept.
Thank you.
With one caveat.
I tilted my head slightly. What caveat? Listening, my mouth dropped open as he explained his one stipulation.
That's the deal, he said when he finished. Take it, or lose the drachma every year.
That was really hitting me in the drachma belt. I rubbed my hands across my face and decided to look at the bigger picture for once. Holding out my hand, I said, "Deal." The fat man leaned forward and shook my hand.
No welching on this, agreed?
I am a god of Olympus. I never go back on my word. I retorted.
Good to know.
Which brings me back to the present. I arrived at the department store and walked inside. The young woman asked me if there was something in particular I was looking for, and I bit back the urge to make a snarky remark. Instead, I said, "No, my dear, I know which way to go." Strolling to the elevator, I pushed the up button, and when the car arrived, I stepped inside and punched the number 3. I straightened my shirt and popped my neck. The car stopped. The doors opened, and there stood Clive.
"You're late," he snapped. "We've got a schedule to keep. You're not all that in a bag of chips, you know."
Little prick. When he turned around and walked off, I had to resist the urge to smite him. It was the same thing every year. He was lucky he was still alive after all this time. The fat man was waiting in a room for me, wearing his red suit.
"Good to see you, Hermes," he said, coming over to shake my hand. "For a minute, I didn't think you were going to make it. Good thing I had Clive call the lovely secretary of yours to remind you."
"You should have him do this, you know," I said.
"The answer is still the same," he replied. "We have a deal."
Yeah, I muttered, stepping behind the screen. A few minutes later, I come out in the same stupid green outfit I had worn all those years ago. Clive stuck his head in the door.
"Are you two ready? We've got a big crowd this year." "There's always a big crowd every year, Clive," the fat man pointed out. He slapped me on the back. "Let's go and greet the children, shall we?" Grumbling, I followed him to the main area, where the big golden chair was set up, a fake Christmas tree now scattered around, 2 plastic reindeer, and a sign that said the North Pole. A huge bag sat on one side of the chair, and on the other side was a smaller bag full of candy canes. The fat man did his famous laugh, and all the children cheered. I walked over to the side where the candy canes were, the bells on my shoes jingling as I moved. "Why does that elf look grumpy?" a little boy asked his mother. "Well, maybe he doesn't like the warm weather," she told him. "Maybe it's because he looks like an idiot in that getup," an older kid said. I looked up and located him. He wasn't hard to find, because he was grinning from ear to ear. He was holding up his phone, probably shooting a video of me. A flick of my wrist and his pants fell down around his ankles, showing everyone his rugrat boxer shorts. Bending over, he grabbed his pants and pulled them up and ran out the room. "That wasn't very nice, Hermes," Clive said as he stood next to me.
"Keep talking, and I'm going to do worse to you, pointy ears." Clive's eyes widened, and he moved away from me, to the other side of the big bag. We spent hours handing out toys and candy canes. One little boy did tug at my heart. He climbed into the fat man's lap. "Hello, Barry," the fat man said to the little boy. "How are you doing this year?" "I'm okay, sir. How are you?" "Well, Mrs. Claus has told me I can't have any more cookies." "Well, that's not very nice," Barry replied. "I'll make sure and leave some out for you tonight." "I'll keep an eye out for that when I'm at your house. What would you like me to bring you?" "Nothing for me, thank you, but could I ask for something for my mother?" "Well, this is an unusual request," he said. "But I'll see what I can do. What does she want?" "She really needs a job, Santa. She's been out of work for 3 months. I hear her cry herself to sleep every night. The other night I heard her on the phone saying she wasn't sure if we were going to be able to stay in our house much longer." "Well, that's a pretty big request. I'm not sure if I can make it happen right away, but I'll do my best. Are you sure you don't want anything for yourself?" "No, sir," Barry said, shaking his head. "I just want my mom to stop crying and be happy again." The fat man gave him a gentle hug. "You are a very special young man, Barry. I have never met anyone so selfless. I'll see what I can do, just for you." "Oh, thank you, Santa," Barry cried, throwing his arms around the fat man's neck. "I knew you'd take care of it." He hopped down and ran off to find his mother. We were there for another 30 minutes before it was all over. As we wandered back to the room so I could change, I said, "How are you going to keep your promise to that little boy?" "I'm not," he replied in a matter-of-fact way. "You are." He stopped and looked at me.
I could see the wheels in your head turning as you listened to him. You already have a plan, don't you?
I shrugged. Of course I did, but I wasn't going to admit that to him. Quickly, I changed clothes. Do you know where Barry lives?
I know where all the children live, remember?
He gave me the address.
Always a pleasure to see you, Hermes. Same time next year, right?
Yeah, whatever, I muttered as I left. The next morning, Barry woke up to the sound of a yip coming from the living room. Jumping out of the bed, he ran to the living room and found a little golden retriever puppy in a box under the tree. As he was kneeling down, he saw an envelope with his mother's name on it. Grabbing it in one hand, he picked up the puppy and hurried to his mother's room. "Mama, look what Santa brought me!" he exclaimed, putting the puppy on the bed next to her. "Oh, my goodness," she said, stroking the puppy's little head. "And this was on the tree for you," Barry continued, handing her the envelope. The return address was the Olympus administration. With a quizzical look on her face, she opened the envelope, pulled out a letter, and read it. Putting her hand over her mouth, she gasped and started to cry. "What's the matter, Mommy?" I have a job." She sniffled. "I'm to report to someone named Mr. Hermes on January 3rd. He's going to put me to work as a bookkeeper." "Oh, he did it! Santa did it! I asked him to get you a job, and he did it!" Barry jumped up and down. "I guess he did, sweetie. I guess he did." I listened to their conversation through the little bug in the puppy's collar and smiled. It felt good to do something for someone else, I thought as I crushed the listening device in my hand. But I wasn't going to make a habit of it. As I headed back to the OA building, I wondered if Clive was enjoying the baby dragon I had sent him as much as Barry was enjoying the new puppy. I really needed to remember to send him the owner's manual on how to take care of that dragon. I'd have to take care of that. Next week. Maybe.